Hi, I'm Claudette with theycallmemartha.com. In today's video, I'm going to show you the latest card kit by Sssck Stamp and then make several cards using these products. So let me walk you through the contents of the kit and then we'll get started making some cute cards. The paper in this month's kit is by Crafter's Companion. It's called Delightful Daisies and it is so cute. You get 12 sheets of 6x6 double-sided cardstock. And it's a really nice heavy weight. I would say it's about an 80-pound weight. And I really love the distressed artwork in this paper this month. I think it's going to be really fun to work with, and I think really goes beautifully with the other items in the kit. Then you also get a die. This one says thanks, and I love that Simon included the shadow with the die. It makes it so much more versatile. This is an A2 size card panel. I just wanted to show you the size and scale of the die, but I think this is going to be a really good one to add to your stash. You also get a sheet of adhesive foam. Mine is black, but I believe that the color varies by kit. This is by Scrapbook Adhesives, and we'll definitely use those today in our card designs. Then you get one sheet of Reverse Gratitude Sentiment Strips by CZ Designs. And what I love about this product is it's printed with toner, so you can run it through your foiling machine. And I also love how easy it is to cut these strips out on your paper trimmer and add them to your cards. So super good item to keep in your crafting stash for sure. Then you get one metallic bronze envelope. This is the first time I've seen this color and I really do love it. It's really beautiful. Then you have a pack of ephemera from Tim Holtz Ideology, 45 pieces, flowers, birds, butterflies, and leaves. I think are also very beautiful and will work beautifully with the papers that come with this month's kit. Then there's a pack of 8 foil transfer sheets by Deco Foil. I have not used these in the past, so I'm looking forward to learning how to use these, but I love having foil in my kit so that I can add that extra little design element to my cards. Then the stamp set in this month's kit is 6x8. I love the versatile sentiments that are here. Everybody needs a thank you card. Everybody needs a birthday card. So I find that this stamp set's going to be really usable and a great one for your stash. I love that they've included these florals here. I think they're going to be fun to color and do some really nice techniques with. So nice stamp set. And then you get 4 sheets of cardstock in this month's kit. This is a 90-pound sheet of matte gold cardstock by Simon Says Stamp. I love this so much. I actually ordered another set of the paper by itself because it's so fun to work with and really adds a beautiful accent to your cards. Then there's a sheet of Simon vellum. This is 40 pound. 1 sheet of Nina Desert Storm cardstock. This is 80 pound. It has a super smooth finish, and up close you see all sorts of little fibers in the paper, but it's very, very smooth and super fun to work with. Lastly, there's a sheet of 100 pound Simon Says Stamp green leaf cardstock that you can use for your card base or you can use as a panel. To contain all of the pieces of your kit, they also include a zippered bag in this month's kit. It varies by color. I know I've seen several that are green. Mine, of course, is blue. But I love the quality of these little bags, and it makes it super nice to keep everything all together in one place. All right, let's go ahead and move over to making some cute cards using these fun products. Let's get started with our first card. I'm going to do a flat shaker card. They're really easy to make and don't require any kind of foam or paper buildup to get the area for your shaker bits. So I started by trimming down one of the pattern papers to 4 by 5 1/4. In this case, I'm going to do a vertical orientation. And then I'm just going to score my card base for an A2 size card. So I'm just going to do a side folding card. So I'm scoring that at 4 1/4. This kit did not include any clear acetate to make this shaker card, so I did pull a piece of clear acetate from my stash. It is, let's see, 4 3/4 by 6 1/4. I'm just going to end up scoring this at a 1/2 inch on all 4 sides. And I know it's really hard to see the acetate on my scoreboard, but I'm just going to score at 1/2 inch on the left and the right side. And this is a really good quality acetate. It's nice and thick, so that's why I'm using a little bit more pressure to score it. You may not have to do that if your acetate is a little bit more lightweight. Okay, so I've scored that all the way around. The next thing I like to do is trim my corners, and this is just so that I don't have extra bulk when I fold my acetate panels back. I'm just trimming it right where the score lines come together, being careful to cut to the right of the intersection. The next thing I'm going to do is fold and burnish all of my score lines. I love to make shaker cards, but I usually do them in the more traditional format with foam or paper buildup. But these flat shakers are so easy to make. I've been making them a lot lately, and they're so fun. My acetate has a clear protective coating, so you just want to make sure that you remove that if yours has that. And then I'm just going to dry fit my panel. Sometimes you need to trim it slightly to allow for the fold in your acetate. So here I'm just putting it inside my acetate, and I'm folding all my edges around just to make sure that I can fit that printed paper inside without it bowing. And I can see the paper rippling in there just a little bit, so I'm just going to trim it about a 1/16 of an inch on 2 sides. I think should be enough. So just a little bit on the right and a little bit along the top. Dry fit that one more time, and it should be perfect. Yep. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is to apply double-sided adhesive on all 4 of these tabs. And I like to get them as close as possible to the fold, so where it meets the front of the shaker without going over. You don't want that adhesive to show through on the front side. So I'm just going to go ahead and add this on all 4 sides. I do like to, in this step, use double-sided adhesive versus a wet glue. It just makes it easy to wrap it around and to have it stick without worrying about glue oozing out or allowing for the dry time. When you're working with acetate, it does take a lot longer for glue to dry. So that's why I tend to use the double-sided adhesive. In this case, this is a 1/2 inch wide score tape. Okay, so I have my adhesive all the way around, and I'm just going to bring my printed paper back in and then begin to wrap the sides of my shaker around the back of my paper. And I'm just going to do this on the left, the right, and the bottom of the paper. I'm going to leave the top open so that we can fill our shaker with all the fun little shaker bits. So you see I've got that on 3 sides, and now I've got the top open where I can begin to fill it. And so I'm going to bring over a variety of things that coordinate with my paper. And when I do my shaker cards, I like to have one element that makes sound, so the shaker is a little bit more intense. In this case, I'm going to use some gold seed beads. And you can just eyeball how much to pour in there. I think that's good. And I almost always put translucent chunky glitter in my shaker cards. And this is just kind of a large hexagon shape, but what I love about it is it picks up whatever color of the paper that it's sitting on. So in this case, you see it's picking up the greens and the golds of the seed beads. And then I have a few different colors of doodlebug sequence. I have white, I have limeade, and I have bumblebee. And I believe that these particular colors have been retired, but any sequence will do. And the one thing about doing these flat shakers, you don't want to overfill them, but you'll be surprised at how much you can actually get in here, and there's still movement. So here I just picked 3 colors that, again, coordinated with the patterned paper that I was using in the background. Now, before you seal up your shaker, I just like to kind of visually look at it and make sure that there's no fuzz, or make sure that there's no sequins that are stacked up. Sometimes when they cut the sequence, it tends to stick together, and if that happens and you seal it, you won't be able to move them around. So they look pretty flat. And then I'm just going to move all my shaker bits to the bottom of my card and then pull my final tab of adhesive and seal that in. And you see you have excellent movement on your shaker bits, even though there's no dimensional foam. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is apply adhesive to the back of my shaker and add this to my card base. Okay, I've got my double-sided adhesive all the way across the back. And here what I'm going to do is just pull my adhesive tape, and then I'm going to center this on my card base. Here I'm making sure that my paper's facing in the right direction. I think this is the bottom. Yep, here's my little butterfly. So I'm going to bring in my card base and just center this on the front, leaving that equal border all the way around on all 4 sides. Give it a good press, and you can see once again you still have all of that movement that the shaker card gives you. I love the colors in this, turning out so pretty. Okay, then I'm going to bring the die in from the set, and I don't think I'm going to use the shadow. I think I'm just going to focus on the sentiment itself. And I'm going to cut this. I'm going to try it in the green. So this is the green that comes in the kit. So I'll just trim out a little piece here and run this through my die cut machine. Okay, I cut this out in the green, and I actually think it's a little too dark and not enough contrast with the back of the paper. So I'm going to do the die cutting once again in the gold that comes in the kit, and we'll see what that looks like. Okay, I have our gold here. I can already tell I love it. How pretty is that? Okay, I really do like the gold on this card. I'm just going to give it a little bit of dimension by running my die through my die cut machine several times just on white cardstock, and then I'll glue those together and create some dimension. All right, I've cut out all of my layers, and what I'm going to do is glue them on top of each other. And if you can get them to stay in the paper without punching it out, it's so much easier to glue. So here I'm just going to add a little bit of glue along the die cut, making sure that I'm getting, for the most part, the edges. You don't want to over glue here because you don't want to have a glued mess. And then I'm just going to lay this one on top of the other, and it makes it so much easier to see where all the edges are and to line them up versus trying to handle it and line it up. So here I'm just using my tweezers to press in all of those little edges, and I'm going to keep going with the rest of the layers. Okay, I have all my white layers glued on. Now I'm just going to add my gold layer. All right, now I have my gold on, and I'm just going to remove it from the negative part of the die cut. And then punch out the little middle of my A. And now I have my sentiment nicely lined up, and I have all of that added dimension. Okay, so I'm just going to bring my card back in, And then I'm going to glue this right, I think, more toward the top of my card. And the reason why is I want to be able to see the sentiment and then the shaker bits at the same time. So I'm just going to add my glue to the back. All right, now I'm just going to center that more toward the top of my card and try not to move it around too much because that wet glue will transfer. And then I'm going to put a weight on the top and hold it down until it dries. I decided to cut one of the sentiments from this sheet that's included in the kit. I'm not sure I'm going to use it, but I thought I would just cut it out and then see how it looks on the card. I think what I want to do is add one that is going to fit in this area under here so that I can nestle it up underneath the greeting. Okay, I trimmed this one out of the sheet. I like that it nestles up underneath just one edge of the sentiment, so I'm going to glue that one down. One thing I love to do is finish the inside of my cards as well. And so here is the part that I cut off of the original piece of paper. And I think I'm just going to add a little strip of it inside my card. All right, I cut out my strip that was left over from cutting down my front panel. This is just about 3/4 of an inch wide. And I'm just going to lay it down along the right edge of the inside of my card. Just like the way it ties it into the card design and finishes off the inside. I decided to cut an additional strip of the gold cardstock that is the same length as my printed paper, and I'm just laying that in for some additional detail right along the edge of that paper strip. So that is card number 1, our flat shaker. Okay, let's move on to card number 2. I've selected another of the printed papers from the card kit, and I trimmed off a piece of my Desert Storm cardstock, and then out of my stash I have pulled a nesting tag set by Hero Arts. I'm just going to cut a tag for the front of our card, and I think I'm going to go with the second to largest and cut that out. All right, so I'm going to distress this tag a little bit just by roughing up the edges with this little distress tool. If you don't have one of these, you can carefully use the side of your scissors, or you can just skip this step. But I wanted to kind of make it a little bit more rustic looking, which is why I'm fraying that edge. And then I think I'm going to go old school and ink the edges of my tag with some distress ink. So here I have, this one's really old. It is Walnut Stain, regular distress ink. And I'm just going to ink up the sides of our tag here. So I'm just using a blending brush just to come in and add a little of that age around the side of our tag. And then I think I might even distress this a little bit more by, I think I'm going to tear off this corner just to give it a little bit of interest. So I've just torn that at an angle, and then I'm going to add a little bit more of that ink to the edge. I'm going to add a little bit of character to the side of our tag here by adding some of our foil. And I learned this nifty trick by Tina Smith, who does Cards and Coffee Time. If you don't follow her, I'll link her up in the video description. And she was one of the very first card designers I ever started following. She just does the most beautiful work. And I saw her working with deco foil like this just by using your finger, and you can rub a little bit of just regular wet adhesive. Here I'm using art glitter glue. And then I'm going to take some of that deco foil and press it into that tacky glue and give it a good press. I'm even going to use my bone folder here just to make sure I have really good contact. And then peel back the foil, and you just get the slightest little bit of a distressed foil finish. I'm going to add a little bit more, I think, up here. And you don't have to pull out your foiling machine or laminator or deal with anything like that. But especially when you're doing more of a mixed media project or a distressed looking project, I think that this method is really cool. And I love how it adds just a little hint of that gold foiling. So let's go ahead and set our tag aside while we build the rest of our card elements. All right, I'm going to trim our printed paper down to, let's start with 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I may end up trimming it down so that we have a nice border all the way around. But for now, I'm going to start out with the 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I do want this to be a vertical format. So I'm cutting the width at 4 1/4, turning it, and then cutting it at 5 1/2. So you can see, I think our tag is going to be situated somewhere about like that. Let's go ahead and build the rest of our elements for our card. I'm going to stamp this image for our tag. So I'm going to, so I have a scrap of the Desert Storm. All right, I'm going to use My Favorite Things Hybrid Chocolate ink, because I think this would work really well with the Desert Storm cardstock. I think I'm just going to do that one more time. Okay, while I have my Misty out, I'm going to go ahead and do a sentiment for this card. And I'm going to use this thank you. So I think I want to gold emboss this. I'm going to treat my cardstock with some anti-static powder. Then I'm going to use my watermark ink pad by Versamark. And I'll do that a couple of times. Great. And then I'm going to use my embossing powder. This one is Gilded Gold by Brutus Monroe. I love that Gilded Gold embossing powder. It always comes out so pretty. Okay, I think I'm going to fussy cut this out a little bit. If you have the dies, that would work great too. In fact, I just ordered mine this morning because I'm loving this stamp set so much. I think I'm going to be using the dies pretty frequently, so can't wait for those to arrive. But in the meantime, I'm just going to fussy cut this out using my trimming scissors. Okay, and then I'm going to color my image a little bit using some detailed brushes. And I'm just coming in with a little bit of Bundled Sage. This is an oxide ink. And I'm being very light-handed here. I just want to add a hint of color. You could accomplish the same thing if you had some colored pencils I think I'm going to do a yellow since there's yellow flowers in our pattern paper. Well, yellow and white. I think I'm going to use one of these colors, and I'm not sure which one I want to use just yet. So let's first try the antique linen and see how that looks on this cardstock. It's a little bit bright. I'm going to try the fossilized amber. Also bright, but I think the color is a little bit more true from the pattern paper. So I'm just going to come in with just a little bit of that ink over top of the flower. All right, I'm going to trim this one out as well. Okay, I have all of my elements for my tag. I think I'm going to distress the edges of my flower just like we did the tag. So I'm just going to come in. Inking your edges always hides all those little flaws, especially if you're cutting things by hand. And I love the distress look that it gives. So I think I'm going to do the same for my sentiment. And then I've brought in a butterfly from the ephemera collection in the kit. And I think I do want to cut this base down so that I have that nice white edge all the way around. So I'm going to cut this to 4 by 5 1/4. That way when I add it to my card base, I have that white edge all the way around. I think in this case, I'm going to pop this up with some fun foam. Okay, I cut a piece of fun foam down to the same dimensions as my card panel. This, as you remember, was 4 by 5 1/4. I like to use fun foam if I'm popping up large spans of paper. And that's so that I don't get rippling as the glue dries or as the card is handled. The foam squares are great for popping up small pieces. But again, when I'm working with a larger piece like my card panel, I want to use a single sheet all the way across. So here I'm just adding my double-sided adhesive to both sides. Here I'm just going to remove the backer and then apply this to my card panel. All right, now I'm going to add this to my card base. And I'm just making sure I'm centering it and I have that white border all the way around. All right, now let's build our tag. I'm going to use a piece of black and white twine. Okay, I like to finish the edges of my twine just by tying a little knot on the end. And then I think I'm going to pop my tag up as well. And so I have a piece of my fun foam left from doing my card. So I'll just add that. All right, I'm going to add that to the back of my tag. And I'm going to position that so it's a little bit more to the left edge of my card base. Then from the kit, I'm going to use some of these foam dots to pop up my flower. I think that's good. And I do like to add just a little bit of wet glue on top of my foam squares, and this gives me just a minute of wiggle room so that I can maneuver it around exactly where I want. And then I'm adding just a little bit of glue in those areas that are going to touch the paper underneath. So again, that little bit of wiggle room lets me position my flower in just the right spot. Give that a good press. All right, I put a little bit of the foam adhesive along just the bottom edge of the sentiment because there's already foam here that's going to hold up the top part. And then I'm just adding a little bit of that glue so that it attaches to the flower underneath. And then I think I'm going to add my butterfly. I'm going to give him a little bit of dimension just by folding him a little bit. And then I do like to add a little bit of ink to these die cuts as well. I'm not a huge fan of the stark edge that's all the way around die cuts. So if you just ink them a little bit, it does help a little bit make them look a little bit more like they're part of the artwork. Then I'm going to add some wet glue. I've just kind of bent up the wings ever so slightly. And then I do like to finish the inside of my card. So this was the piece that I had trimmed off my card panel. And why not use it instead of throwing it away? But it does bring in all of the colors and the patterns to kind of finish off the inside of your card. So I'm just going to glue it in along that inside edge. And then if you want, you can add a little bit of glue to kind of hold down the trail of your twine. And I'm just going to have it fall in kind of a natural arched position like that. I think I'm going to add a little bit of this gold foiling right here along this edge. Just trying to kind of tie in those design elements a little bit more. So just a little bit of gold foiling. I think I'm going to have to get a new piece here. And then maybe a little bit up in this area. Just going to finish off the middle of my flower with just a little gemstone. These are just flat pearls. And the glue around it will dry clear. And that is card number 2. For our third card, I thought I would build our background using the Desert Storm cardstock as our foundation and using a Woodgrain embossing folder to give it some texture. So from my stash, I pulled out my Tim Holtz 3D Woodgrain embossing folder. I'm just going to run my cardstock through that and be right back. All right, so I have my panel embossed, and I think I'm going to add a little bit of distress ink to this panel just to pull out and define the pattern that the embossing folder gave us. So here I'm just using regular distress ink in walnut stain, and I'm just going to very lightly go over portions of the panel so that you can really see the nice wood grain that 3D folder pressed into the paper. All right, I've trimmed down our background paper to 4 by 5 1/4 so that when I add it to our card base, we have that nice white edge all the way around. And then I cut a piece of sheet foam or fun foam down to the same dimensions as our panel. And as I said earlier, I like to use fun foam when I'm popping up a large piece like a background. It just adds a lot more stability and really keeps the card nice and straight and avoids a lot of the rippling that happens when you try to use small pieces of foam to pop up a large piece of paper. So here I'm just going to use my score tape. I'm going to add it to both sides while I have the tape in my hand, and then add it to my background. Okay, I'm just going to line up my edges of my background because remember I cut these to be the exact same size. And then I've cut a top folding card base, and I'm just going to score this in the middle. This is an A2 size card. So for a top folding card base, I'm just going to score this at 5.5. All right, before I glue my panel down to my card base, I thought it would be nice to bring in some sort of textile. So I have a small roll of tulle. This is kind of a light blush color from my stash, and I'm just going to cut, oh, I don't know, maybe 15 inches of it or so. This tulle is about 3 inches wide. So I think I'm going to fold it in half so that it's about 1.5 inches wide before I trap it underneath my card base. About 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch from the lower edge of my card base. And then I'm going to center my wood grain paper on my card base, trapping that tulle in. So you see it's now underneath the wood grain. And then I'm going to tie a knot off to the right side. And I'm not going to tie a bow, but rather just a knot. So I've tied it once around, and now I'm going to tie it once more. And then trim the edges. And again, this is just intended to give it a little bit of texture. Okay, so from the ephemera pack, I went and pulled a couple of different pieces. I really liked this image, and I thought it would be fun as kind of a foundational piece. I'm going to build on top of it, but you should be able to see some of these flowers from the background. And then I used a flower, a leaf, and I did pull out a bird. I'm not sure I'm going to use them all, but I did pull out those pieces. And then I thought it would be nice to add a little bit of the matte gold cardstock. So I'm just going to cut a piece that will matte this ephemera piece just right. So I'm going to add a little bit of distress ink to the edges of this ephemera piece. I like to do this so that it really blends in with the other pieces that we're layering. So I'm just coming in very softly around the edges all the way around. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the flower and the bird, as well as the leaves. I'm going to go ahead and matte my ephemera piece with my gold cardstock. And I'm just going to use double-sided adhesive. So a quick tip, because I'm covering the majority of my cutout here of gold cardstock with my ephemera piece, I went ahead and cut the middle out with another die so that I could use it for another card or another project. So here's the part that I cut out. You're not going to see this anyway, so it's a really good way to save cardstock. All right, I'm just going to line this up so that I have an even border all the way around. All right, now I'm going to bring my ephemera piece back in. I've matted it on my gold cardstock, and I've added some double-sided adhesive on the back. And I'm just going to center it top to bottom and then nestle the right edge of the ephemera kind of up against this knot. And then press that down. And then what I want to do is I'm going to use this flower piece, and I think probably some of this greenery, but I think I want to pop this up. So I'm going to use the foam squares that came with the kit and pop this up. And then a couple behind the leaves as well. I'm just going to lay this over the top of this botanical. Now, if you like this print, you're pretty much good to go. You add a sentiment, and this card is actually quite pretty. But I wanted to layer in some additional elements, so I'm going to add that flower on top, as well as the leaves. And then I'm going to stamp a sentiment to go right in this area. For the sentiment on this card, I'm going to stamp the thinking of you. And I'm going to use some Versamark Onyx Black ink. And then I will just trim this out by hand. Okay, and then I decided it would be nice to add some of the foil. So I'm just going to add a little bit of wet glue, rub it with my finger a little bit until it gets tacky, and then lay my foil on top. And then I think I'll add a little bit more down here as well. Pop up my sentiment. And add that to my card front. And I think I'm going to reserve the bird that I had pulled for another card. I think I have enough on the front of this card. I like the way it looks, but we'll look at it one more time. All right, I'm just going to add that sentiment right on top. And I really like how that looks. All right, this is card 3. I hope you've enjoyed these 3 cards using the Simon Says stamp Etched Greetings May 2023 card kit.